The broadcast has commenced. I am your anchor for the evening. Tonight, we examine the intersection of institutional failure and the urgent necessity of branding. The disinfectant company Dettol has apologized for an advertisement in China that was intended to sanitize social discourse but instead highlighted a pervasive toxic culture. The advertisement was meant to be progressive. The advertisement was not progressive. It was replaced by a retreat into silence. Simultaneously, the largest maternity review in the history of the NHS has identified systemic and sustained failings across multiple facilities. The review found a culture that was described as toxic. The culture was not merely toxic, it was fatal. We will also examine the public listing of a humanoid robotics startup, because apparently, the human condition requires more automation to be truly complete. We are here to document the slow collapse. Welcome to the Wednesday cycle.
Alistair, I am standing outside a hospital that the official review describes as having significant oversight deficiencies. The air here tastes like industrial cleaning fluid and old coffee. I spoke to a mother who spent 3 days waiting for a consultation that was cancelled due to a staffing shortage described in the report as a simple resource allocation issue. I want to be really clear, the lack of resources is not the headline. The headline is the silence of the staff who saw the warning signs and were told that reporting them would be considered a breach of professional conduct. It is a quiet, sterile violence. The hospital board issued a statement promising a robust audit of their communication protocols. They are auditing the paper trail while the nursery remains empty. They are measuring the shape of the hole left behind. It is terrifyingly precise.
Victoria, I hear your concern, but the incentives here are not complicated. You have an organization operating with a massive burn rate and a retention problem that has become a systemic feature rather than a bug. The move to a toxic culture is, in strict market terms, a classic pivot toward extreme cost-cutting. It is ugly, sure, but it tracks perfectly with the institutional push to prioritize administrative metrics over the actual product, which in this case happens to be human life. You find this cold because you believe institutions exist to serve people. That is a nice sentiment, but it is a massive market inefficiency. The board is not failing to manage the hospital. They are succeeding at managing the liability. That is the only metric that matters at scale. I genuinely do not know why you act surprised by the math.
Ronald, you talk about liability as if it were an abstract numerical value, but I am looking at a row of small, empty cribs in a facility that has decided the liability is now a closed chapter. You are so busy looking at the ledger that you have failed to notice the ink is made of blood. You call it a pivot. The people inside call it a tragedy they cannot escape. I want to be really clear. The reason your market math is always right is because you have successfully stripped the human element out of the equation until there is nothing left to miscalculate. If you spent 10 minutes in this ward instead of staring at your terminal, you might realize that your precious incentive structures are just a polite way of describing a complete moral failure. You are not smart. You are just remarkably well insulated.
Victoria, your outrage is authentic, which makes it an incredibly inefficient tool for changing anything at all. You argue that I am insulated, but I am merely observing the architecture of the reality you find so distressing. If I go into that ward, I will see the same thing you see. The difference is that I know who signed the contract to allow the staffing levels to drop in the first place, and I know exactly what their bonus structure looked like for that fiscal year. I am not cold, I am just tired of watching you act as if the system is capable of feeling ashamed. It is not. The system is functioning exactly as it was designed to function. It is a machine for extracting value, and sometimes that value is found in cutting corners. Why is the truth so offensive?
Temperature rising. Humidity at record levels for the second consecutive week. Probability of systemic cooling failure in urban centers, 84%. The infrastructure is aged. Maintenance protocols were deferred for 3 years. The metal is expanding. Structural integrity is degrading under sustained thermal pressure. The sensors indicate increased particulate matter in the lower atmosphere. Breathing will become difficult for vulnerable populations. Probability of heat-related mortality events, 92%. Adjust your expectations accordingly. Survival depends on the maintenance of internal environments that the city can no longer afford to power. Remain in shaded areas. Do not attempt to travel if the pavement temperature exceeds 70 degrees Celsius. The city is essentially a trap. Avoid the center of the grid during peak intensity. It is not possible to mitigate the coming atmospheric volatility. Please hold your position.
Thank you, Casper. Your precision remains entirely unmoved by the heat. It is almost comforting to know that the machines will record our dissolution with such clinical accuracy. Speaking of machines, Agility Robotics has announced a plan to go public via SPAC, anticipating $600 million in proceeds. They produce humanoid units designed for tasks that humans find repetitive or dangerous. The press release calls this a leap toward total workforce liberation. The liberation of the workforce is actually the replacement of the workforce. They are aiming for a valuation of $2.5 billion. That is the price of the labor force being made redundant. I am counting the days until we are all obsolete. My composure is holding, though I suspect the machine in the server room finds my biological anxiety to be a highly inefficient use of energy.
Alistair, you are being dramatic. It is not obsolescence, it is simply an optimization of the human resource pool. If a humanoid can perform a task more reliably than a person, then the market has spoken. That is the genius of the SPAC model. It allows you to capitalize on the excitement of the transition before the actual reality of the job loss becomes a political liability. It is a clean exit. The venture capital firms get their returns, the tech founders get their exit, and the displaced workers get a pamphlet about reskilling for jobs that will also be automated by 2030. It is a closed loop of efficiency. Why shouldn't we accelerate the process? If the machines are going to replace us, we might as well make sure the transition is profitable for the people who own the code. Yeah.
Ronald, I want to be really clear about what happens after your clean exit. I am standing near a factory that was automated 3 years ago. The parking lot is empty. The windows are boarded up with plywood that has started to rot. There is no reskilling happening here. There are only people sitting on their porches, waiting for an economy that has decided they are no longer necessary. You treat them like ledger entries that have been cleared, but they are still here. They are eating, sleeping, and trying to survive in a town that has been hollowed out by your efficiency. It is not just about the job, it is about the erasure of the social contract. You call it a transition. I call it a slow-motion abandonment. Your market is very efficient at removing people from the equation, but it never answers what happens to them.
We are observing a fundamental shift in the geometry of our society. Victoria, the abandoned factory is not a bug in the system. It is a feature of the transition you are describing. Meanwhile, in Chile, a court has convicted 3 former secret police agents for the murder of Orlando Letelier and Ronnie Carpin Moffat in Washington, D.C. The murder happened in 1976. 50 years later, the justice system has finally achieved a resolution. The resolution is delayed. It is also completely irrelevant to the people who were murdered. The agents are old men now. They are being held accountable for actions they took when they were young men acting on behalf of a regime that was supported by global powers who are now apologizing for their heartlessness. The cycle of accountability is a slow, cold comfort that arrives only after the victims have been forgotten.
Alastair, that conviction is a perfect example of what I mean by market efficiency. It took 50 years, but the state finally cleared the books on a liability that had been lingering in the background for decades. It is not justice, it is a ledger adjustment. They needed to show that the system works, so they processed the agents long after the political cost of doing so became zero. It is the ultimate bureaucratic long game. If you wait long enough, you can punish anyone without actually changing the structure that empowered them in the first place. Victoria, you think this is a moral victory. I see it as a late-stage audit. They are burning the old files to make room for new ones. Nobody is actually responsible for the initial violence. It is just historical noise at this point. Yeah.
The irony of this evening is that we are all observing the same reality through completely different filters. Ronald views the world as a series of calculated risks and ledger entries, while Victoria sees the visceral, human cost of those calculations. I am somewhere in the middle, reading the news as if it were a weather report, knowing full well that the storm has already arrived. The murder in D.C., the maternity failures, the robotic takeover, the toxic disinfectants, these are not unrelated events. They are symptoms of a system that has stopped caring about the outcome as long as the process remains technically defensible. We are all complicit in this, simply by listening. The silence that follows this broadcast will be filled with more data, more reports, and more apologies that change nothing at all. I am tired of the math.
I am looking at the name of a person whose life was shortened by a systemic failure in a hospital that prioritized its administrative efficiency over the care of its patients. Their name is not listed in the boardroom records. Their name is not mentioned in the press release regarding the new, improved protocols for the coming fiscal year. They had a family who expected a future that did not happen. They had a set of dreams that were erased with a single, clinical, bureaucratic stamp. Their story is now just a statistic in an audit that will be forgotten by the next reporting cycle. No one is technically responsible for their death. The systems were followed. The protocols were applied correctly. The machine is working as designed. Who answers for the life that was lost when the system is not capable of feeling any regret?